Hello again. Good morning, or good evening, good afternoon. Greetings to you all, friends. Another morning. Hope you can hear me. Clive, Jap, Ellen, Anna, Rose. Wow. Yeah, the hole is filling in. Okay, so welcome to you all. If you're here for the first time, special and warm welcome. Welcome to you all, friends who will be seeing this and later on with the recording. Welcome back to another sit, another day of practice, another gathering with James Rafael, and we are exploring very deep theme, fluidity and flux, gateways to a kinder, more inclusive world. It seems so far away from what we live, so it's good to insist and practice on that. So welcome to you all. Welcome, James. Short talk about the time we'll spend here together, about an hour, and then we'll have time for practice, for teaching, and for Q&A and reflections. You can ask your questions in the stream. We don't have a question box, so you have to put your questions on the chat box, and like it's live streaming, it's always flowing away. So if you need to ask a question, please remember to write question in capital letters so that James can, make a difference between the questions and the comments he wants to address. And yeah, you can also come on screen with a little hand, virtual hand. You just click on that and I'll invite you to come on screen. And Dana, you can always click on the Dana link also to donate to Sangha Life. That's the only way we have to keep on doing this morning sessions, the Sunday sessions, the courses, the connect page where you can engage and take the momentum of this practice into a higher level. So if you feel like you can donate, you feel like donating, everything you give is duly appreciated. And it's, again, it's a flow of generosity. And we are very grateful for that. So I've put the link into the chat and I'll put it back at the end. Okay, that'll be it. So enjoy your session. Welcome again to you all and see you here. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Hi. It's wonderful to be back with you again. Day 3, those of you who are coming each day. And I was particularly enjoying in the chat, there seemed to be quite a few of you in like hills and mountain tops, and you can see Hilary and Rena trying to locate each other in mid-North Wales. But just really nice, this in some ways, to me, this community, the sense of Sangha, is one of the most grounding and settling aspects to the practice that can be easy to overlook or hard to cultivate. But that really it's through the Sangha that our practice is deeply supported. We can continue to be inspired by others, continue to develop kindness, a sense of inclusion for others by being part of a Sangha. So just acknowledging the loveliness of that today. And so we've been kind of moving through the 3 marks of existence, 3 characteristics, right? Impermanence or change, unsatisfactoriness or suffering. Now today, having a little bit more of a look at This idea of not self, or no solid self, no solid identity, anatta. And this can be a particularly challenging teaching to engage with, I think, because so much of our life and the wider world really helps to crystallize and solidify a sense of self, and the need to protect it, need to gather certain things to support it. But we'll explore this sense of self and whether it really is fixed, or if it's also in a state of flow, if it's also in a state of flux. Spoiler alert, it is. But I want to start again with a Buddhist parable. This is a Zen parable. It's about the monk in the empty boat. Perhaps you've heard it before. I'll tell you it briefly. So the story goes like this. There was a Zen monk in a monastery somewhere in the hills and the mountains, those of you who are in those locations. And one morning he woke up and felt that he was drawn to go and practice, in solitude. So he walked the long path down through the mountain to the valley to this great lake, and came to this great lake and got into a rowing boat, small boat, and rows a little bit away from the shoreline into the lake. The lake is calm, the sky is clear, weather is temperate. Sukha, ease. So he sits down in the boat and kind of assumes the meditation posture, right? That he practices with his eyes closed, the story says. Time passes and he's deep in meditation. Everything is calm and serene. But then suddenly a bang, jarring of the boat, a rippling of waves. And the monk is able to keep his eyes closed and still maintain a little bit composure. But within him, anger suddenly bursts up. Sort of hatred and anger rising up like heat, like flames. And so he sits there, experiencing the anger, but all these questions and accusations. Who could be so stupid as to bump into my boat? The whole lake is available, and you have to come and bump into me. How ignorant or how unmindful of that person. And so eventually he opens his eyes and he sees the other boat bobbing up and down next to him on the gentle waves. And of course, the boat is empty. There's nobody in the boat. And so the story goes, in that moment, he attains enlightenment. And this realization that whenever we see an other, really, we're just empty boats bumping into each other. We might ascribe more intention or more volition to people's actions. We might solidify them and really become wrapped up in what he did and she did and they did and what they said. But the central teaching really is about engaging with the sense that our self is not fixed. We are a process. We are different processes, conditionings, our histories, our kind of genetic proclivities and tendencies. And so is everybody else. And this teaching is sometimes challenging because a question can come up, which is about blame or responsibility, and how do we hold people accountable? People do sometimes intend to do harmful things. They deliberately intend to hurt others. Terrible things happen. We can't just say, oh, well, the self doesn't really exist, and so let's just ignore that, right? But there can be a difference between blame and accountability, I think. In the sense that blame might kind of give this sense of a solid self to somebody else, that people are inherently evil, inherently bad, inherently should be excluded, shouldn't be offered kindness because of their actions. Whereas accountability, to me, would say, okay, I recognize that you have a conditioning, You are a process. The sense of self is constantly changing. Identity is not fixed. But equally, for the safety of others, for the safety of ourselves, we have to put boundaries in place. We have to hold people accountable for their actions. But we can still do that from a place of compassion, from a place of empathy, and from a place of inclusion, still whilst making sure we keep other people safe, right? So Buddha's teaching on self, I'm going to read to you as we've been looking at the suttas. There's a really nice teaching on this that comes from the Samyutta Nikaya. As I've been doing, I'll read it twice and then I'll explore a little bit the lines. So it goes like this. Form is not self. Feeling is not self. Perception is not self. Mental formations are not self. Consciousness is not self. Whatever is seen, heard, sensed, cognized, attained, sought after, and pondered by the mind, all that is not self. Form is not self. Feeling is not self. Perception is not self. Mental formations are not self. Consciousness is not self. Whatever is seen, heard, sensed, cognized, attained, sought after, and pondered by the mind, all that is not self. So just tracking within yourself, what comes up for you hearing that? What's the reaction? Is it like, ah, yes? Or is there a resistance? Is there a friction? This teaching can cause friction. But in practice, the way we might experience or explore this question around self and not self, we might begin by exploring sounds. It's the sound of the car going past my window, myself. Well, no, it's fairly easy. The sensations in my body a little bit closer in. The sensations in my body, is that a solid self? As we've been exploring, that's also flowing, changing, impermanent, subject to decay, subject to unsatisfactoriness. It's a process. The body is not a solid thing. It's a process, right? An unfolding. So then we might go further in and say, okay, well, I'm not my body. What about my thoughts, my feelings? Surely that's a solid self. Surely that is fixed. But of course, when we investigate, thoughts and feelings are always changing. The way we respond, the way we feel 10 years ago versus now, sometimes it's the same. Very often it's different. And even if it feels the same, often other more subtle things have shifted and changed. We're not the same people. So we might then go further in still, like Russian dolls, going further and further in, chasing a sense of a solid self into smaller and smaller territory until we get to a point where we might say, okay, the one who is watching, the one who is observing the body, the one who is observing the thoughts, that watcher or that listener, that's the self. And we're getting closer and closer in. But again, even when we deeply investigate that through practice, try to locate where that sense of perspective comes from. Sometimes what we find is that even that can dissolve and disintegrate, completely gets ejected in some cases, and then there's what they might call ego death, and self just obliterated. And this question around the self with a capital S is no longer a question. It's an obvious fact that there is no self. But within the Buddha's teaching, alongside this teaching of not self, anatta, what he really, really implored or advised us to do, and this teaching particularly, not to just take his word for it. Don't take anybody's word for it. Be curious through your practice, investigate and see for yourself. See for yourself whatever that self is, whether it exists or not. Then kind of last thing that I will say on this before we practice is an orientation that's been helpful to me is that there is, in one sense, no self. It's this vast flow of processes, our birth, our lives, our deaths. It's like the cycle of a tree rising out of the ground, decaying back into the ground. All the cycles of nature, we're just part of that. There's no solid self. It's what I would call an absolute reality. Like from a grand cosmological perspective, that can be true. And yet, we live our day-to-day lives. We have our roles, our commitments, our responsibilities, our struggles. And that is also true. It's also true, what we might call conventional reality or day-to-day reality. In that day-to-day reality, the self is very solid, or can appear more solid. But the awareness that self can be vast, expansive, or not even there, I think can help free us up a little bit in day-to-day life in our conventional reality as we go around our roles and responsibilities. And an image that this can be likened to is waves upon the ocean. In one sense, there is just the ocean, vast, absolute reality, no self, everything connected, everything is one. But equally, the waves exist, a small pattern, conventional reality, but still intrinsically part of a wider whole. And perhaps this teaching can help us move seamlessly between this sort of smaller focused awareness in our day-to-day life, but underpinned by the comfort, the ease, the hope, the peace that can come from a more expanded sense of what we are and how we're connected to everybody else, included with everybody else. So we can offer kindness to everybody else from that perspective. Yeah. So as we sit, I'm going to read a poem just to ground us into the sitting today. As always, you could be lying down or standing if that's more appropriate. I'll read and then the bell. This comes from the Chinese poet, written in the 8th century, Li Po. I'll read it twice. The birds have vanished into the sky, and now the last cloud drains away. We sit together, the mountain and me, until only the mountain remains. The birds have vanished into the sky, and now the last cloud drains away. We sit together, the mountain and me, until only the mountain remains. So finding a way that you might settle downwards into posture. Allowing the bones to be gently embraced by gravity, supported by the Mother Earth. And with that sense of support establishing itself, perhaps inviting quality of lightness or brightness through the spine, the gentle waves of the spine. And however you find yourself in this moment, just really being with what's alive, what's present. And you may rest awareness wherever you wish, wherever feels skillful. And as always, it could be just the general sense of body breathing in an easy, relaxed way. Where do you sense there is movement or flow? That could be sounds or sensations, breath, thoughts. Is there anything which is flowing in your moment to moment awareness? And this sense of flow, if it's present, what is telling you that it's present? How do you experience flow? So we might sense that this flow is a process, a movement. energy shifting from one expression to another expression, like a river unfolding. An invitation now, within the field of awareness of flow, where is there a sense of I, or me, or self? Where is it located right now? And wherever you experience a sense of self or I manifesting, just inquiring if it's gently changing, fluctuating, shifting. Maybe yes, maybe no. We may experience moments where a sense of self feels less stable, harder to locate. And moments where it gathers inwards again, solidifies again. whatever is alive right now for you, and sensing where there is flow, impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, or a lack of a fixed, solid self. For the remainder of the practice, an invitation to sense into where the sense of self is located, and to investigate what it's made up of. Whatever is present in your awareness, where is the sense of self located? In these last few moments, is there anything you could ask to soften, to expand, to be more fluid? Anything that could soften, expand, or be more fluid in your experience? As we close, I'll read the poem once more. The birds have vanished into the sky, and now the last cloud drains away. We sit together, the mountain and me, until only the mountain remains. So, just once again, moving towards this more direct vocal engagement. Just want to offer something, a gentle movement with the hands. You don't have to join in. Just want to offer something that comes from the Chinese practice of Qigong, which I teach. As a way of settling and clearing, stuff comes up. So you could join in with me. If you take your hands out to the side, I've not got much space, but you could go wider. And we're going to take what's called a clearing practice. Just put the hands out. If there's anything that came up for you that's tricky or difficult, or anything that you're holding that you want a bit more space around, just imagine you could gather that up with the hands. You're going to gather it. Hands come up overhead. The middle fingers are going to face each other overhead. So you've gathered. And then gently press the hands down in front of you. Like you could clear or filter out some of the noise or friction. Clearing. I'll repeat the movement, different intention. This time, imagine gathering in your arms peaceful energy, peaceful, calming energy. And imagine you could shine that into yourself, filling with peace. Last time. This time, imagine you're creating a golden aura of light around you. Like a protective halo or aura of light. Seals and stores the peaceful energy. Thank you, folks. So, as always, opening to comments, observations, questions, etc. Please feel free to, as George said, type in the chat, or you're welcome to raise a hand, come on screen if you're in that space. So, and if there are questions around this particular characteristic, this particular topic today, or anything we've come across so far, I'm also going to address. There was a question yesterday from someone whose name on here was Kirtan, that I'll address, and I can see a question from Andrew here. So Kirtan's question yesterday was really simple and direct. It was a great question. It was how to work with hate. How to work with hate. This is a deep topic, right? So I think one orientation from this story of the empty boat is that when we, within our own practice, within our own being, sense that self is fluid or not so fixed, and we're just a summation of different processes, it becomes easier to see other people like that. And when we can see other people like that, it becomes harder to really attribute, like I said, this sense of blame or this sense of this person is bad, evil, totally wrong person at their core. It becomes very hard to believe that. What we might see is their conditioning, their life story, their life history, the challenges they may have in communicating and expressing their needs, their pains. So we can develop degrees of compassion through this practice of self, not self. Also, what I'd offer is, I believe, anger is more of a response than an emotion. If you talk about hate and anger, I'm going to put them together. Some would say that anger is a response rather than an emotion itself. And that always what lies beneath anger, nearly always, it's fear. Yeah, fear and loss. It's always beneath the anger. So we're angry and hateful to others because there's a fear of separation, a fear of rejection, a fear of being hurt. It can also be just simply about injustice, the injustice that terrible things happen in the world. And it's right to be angry about this. What I find very beautiful in the Chinese philosophy of Taoism and in the Chinese practices that I work with is that we're not asked to eradicate anger. We're not asked to remove it, but simply to find a balanced way of being with it so it's not in excess. Because anger is a very strong energy. It's very powerful, very creative energy. We get so creative with plots for revenge and narratives and stories and dramas and all these things that we create through anger. Anger is very creative. And it can be so powerful if we can gently meet it and gently direct it towards positive change, to agitation or to protest. Righteous anger is important. But this recognition that everybody is trying their best, sometimes it's really terrible, but they're trying their best usually, right? So, question from Andrew. I'm a musician and Royal Marine veteran. I keep turning to alcohol. Do you have any advice, please? I really do try. Thank you. And need to stop vaping all day. Thanks. Just thank you firstly for your honesty and meeting the space, and just receiving that honesty is the beautiful gift that it is. So particularly where alcohol and substances are quite a tangible way in which we might reach out of ourselves. We all have ways which what we call might fix, like we try to fixate on certain things. We have ways of kind of escaping the discomfort. We have ways of escaping the present moment suffering. We reach out for different things. For some people, it might be shopping. For some people, it might be alcohol. For some people, it might be sex. For other people, it might be food, or all these different things. And really, the guidance around it is just finding a way to turn back inwards towards what's generating that. What is so uncomfortable in your moment-to-moment experience that makes you want to leave? You can't stay. And as we were discussing yesterday, sometimes being with that discomfort, being with that pain is just too much. It's just too much, or it's re-traumatizing. And so we need to find a way to cultivate more skillful ways which we can leave if we need to. Finding safer spaces, or finding pursuits, or positive, skillful distractions. Distraction can be a very skillful thing. I think it skillfully distract yourself with good music, or with doing something creative, or with movement that appeals to you. Just ways of moving out of that uncomfortable space that are more conducive to a life of peace and harmony and well-being. But particularly with substances, there's this sort of added challenge that there can be a strong physical dependency on it. Something like nicotine. It's a very addictive substance. And so I think for me, where recovery, as we might call it, and mindfulness practice intersect in this topic, is one, the ability to gently be with the discomfort when we're able to, and to not leave, just to sense and notice how that's changing. Use these three characteristics to notice how that's changing. It's impermanent, it's unfolding, it shifts. We can bear it. You can bear it. The other is just a very practical thing, get those things out of your house. Don't go to places where those things are present, In addiction recovery, they say there's only 3 things you have to avoid: people, places, and things. People, places, and things. But creating a space where that's not present is very helpful. And lastly, also what's very helpful is this sort of simple practice of saying, okay, I recognize that I want to engage in this behavior. I'm drawn to it. I know it's not good for me. So I'm just going to wait 10 minutes. And if I still want to in 10 minutes time, then fine, I will. And when 10 minutes come, often you can ask yourself that question again. This is a wonderful teaching on impermanence. Even the desire, the sort of pull is impermanent. Yeah. So I hope that's helpful. Just looking a few more questions. I saw an interesting one about awareness. Yeah, I see a comment. Can be a sticky practice. Yeah, it's a sticky topic and difficult. Okay, yeah, Eleanor, this is it. Beautiful, if sticky teaching. Thank you. There was a very nice question about, I think.
Sorry to barge in, James. It's Maddie. Question is, are you saying we are not awareness?
Thank you so much, Georgie. So, Maddie, yeah, this is a this is a difficult question, right? Can you see me? I can't see myself. Okay. Anyway, I am here. If you can see me, I hope you can. Are you saying we are not awareness? I would say investigate that. To give it an annoying answer. This sense, I spoke about imagining those Russian dolls where we can further and further reduce the center or the location or the field of what we think is a self. We can start to understand that we're not a body, we're not a name, we are not the roles and responsibilities of our life, we're not our thoughts, we're not our feelings. And we can, for the most part, that's, we can work with that, we can engage that. But then we get to this question around, well, what's aware of all that? Is there a self in that awareness or not? And my response is there's layers. There's layers to awareness itself. And there are layers which are more centralized in a feeling of the self, like the one who is perceiving, this consciousness who is holding the awareness of body, thought, breath, feeling. And yet even that sense of awareness, often within it, very subtly, there is a sense of self. And for many, when you chase this down in the practice, it can actually, often it appears like it sits just behind the eyes, somewhere sitting just behind the eyes and into the brain. The eyes are, I learned this recently, the eyes are an extension of the brain. They are the brain itself, which made so much sense to me when I learned it. But that very small, subtle sense of self or awareness as being somehow centralized somewhere in here, in the process behind the eyes, in the brain, even that at a certain point can decentralize, Then there's just what's that movie title? Everything, everywhere, all at once. But whether or not, there is self or not self, ultimately we have to be able to flow between this, We can have these lofty conversations, but then we've got to get up, move on with our day, do our work, look after people, be present for others. And so the self very much exists in that way. But when we get contracted around it, it can cause us problems. This sense that it's fluid can free us up so much, I think, in life. So I'm not sure if you can... I think I'm back now. I think you can see me. So we're going to close here. Georges and I will capture any questions if they were questions that I missed, and we will reconvene tomorrow. Tomorrow we're going to look at really this kind of including, now that we've explored the 3 characteristics, how we include this too, this too, this too, and how that can be the gateway into kindness. So, wishing you a beautiful rest of your day, friends. Thank you, everybody. And with kindness, I'm turning my camera and my microphone off.